Welcome all to another NGC Bocas Litfest conversation with two amazingly talented Jamaican writers. As chair, and believe me, I'm under some seriously heavy manners here regarding the conduct of this 50-minute session. So very quickly, because all of their achievements are available online, and I've got their permission to introduce them very briefly. Here we have Marcia Douglas. She's the author of The Marvelous Equations of the Dread, Madame Fate, and Notes from a Writer's Book of Cures and Spells, as well as a poetry collection, Electricity Comes to Cocoa Bottom. She's currently Associate Professor at the University of Colorado, Boulder. On my right, Kai Miller, writer of poems, prose fiction, and essays. His novel, Augusttown, is the winner of the 2017 OCM Bocas Prize for Fiction. He's published 9 books, and I think there's another on the way, including The Cartographer Tries to Map a Way to Zion, winner of the 2014 Forward Prize, and Writing Down the Vision, winner of the 2014 OCM Bocas Prize for Nonfiction. He's currently based in London. That's enough about them. Now we want to hear from them, and so we're going to start with no more than 10-minute reading from each of the writers from their latest books. Marcia, would you be so good as to start? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Bocas, and thank you, Jeremy and Hannah of People Tree Press for believing in this book. I am going to jump right into the middle of the book. In this book, the bass rhythm of reggae music is so powerful that it can call back the dead. And I am going to read you a passage in which Bob Marley returns from the dead, and he meets up with other spirits, you could call them. And this is in, he returns, he comes to the spirit yard via a hurricane. The wind whirls in the spirit, then lands him, give thanks and praise in a yard, dry and quiet and swept clean as holy ground. The others have been waiting for his arrival in the eye. The bass rhythm of the people has called them too. They lean against the zinc fence or sit on their haunches. Some of them have bongo drums. There is a congregation of birds in an ackee tree and the smell of corn roasting on hot coals. A red flag blows from a bamboo pole. A woman steps forward. They call me Nanny, she says, Queen Nanny of the Maroons. Is me could catch the white soldiers' bullets and spit them out. That is what the books say, but I used to do so much more. I could grind a soldier's teeth and use the powder to light a good fire. I could spot one of them coming between the trees without turning around. I would feel it too, the two red of their jackets on my bare arm. One of them would piss behind a tree, and I would hear it a mile off. If the books really said all, the very ink would stink of blood. Let's leave it at that. But see me here, the people have called. I have heard their new time music beating the ground, and the feet of the children dancing, their hopefulness mixed with pain. Listen to me. There is an echo which travels along fault lines. It comes from their music, the strange music of the people. Sometimes the earth shudders and our bones move in their graves. How can we not arise? Up, up, ye mighty, someone sings. An elder steps forward. His long gray locks touch his knees. He carries a staff carved with a lion of Judah. My name is Leonard, he says, Leonard Howell. They call me the first Rasta, but that don't matter now. And they call me a thief, same like they call Garvey. Said I tricked the people with false tickets to Ethiopia. Thief or not, I had a vision. History needed me to keep the wheel turning. Yes, I. I come now to organize, to buoy the people up, to higher groundation, praises. Another woman steps forward. Her head is tied with a piece of flour bag. One furious plait twines against her face. Me don't have no name, she says. Everybody forget it, and now not even me can remember it. It happened like that to plenty of we. We sow and plant and cook and sweep and wash and scrub and reap and stir and cry and pray and bend over and scream and break we back and then hold it straight again to send the children to school with piece of pencil so they can learn to write the book of we story and never forget it. I heard the babies crying from my grave, my grands and my grands' grands, and how could I not return? Mercy. A little girl wipes tears from her eyes. It was election time, and gunshots fly into my face, straight up my nose, she says. Me step in front to save my brother. He was only 3, and Mama said to mind him while she go look one tin of mackerel. Me catch the shot just like Nanny, only it killed me. Me name Hortense, but them call me Tensi. From over this side, I hear my brother, big man he is now, clicking a gun, and the sound of the click make my bones them tremble. Don't, I call out, but he can't hear me. I want to stop him. Help me stop him. Stop the violence. The people must stop it. It's long time we have warned them. A man steps forward. It is Garvey. He wears a green velvet vest under a black jacket. He has a hat of plumes. We must hold together now, he says. If the living have no hindsight, then we must be that hindsight. If the living have no foresight, then we must be that foresight. If the living have no wind, then we must be that wind. If the living have no fire, then we must be that fire. Up, up. Let us be the terror and the tenderness, the storm and the lullaby. Let us whirl together as one mighty force. Enough of the preaching Torah, a woman calls. She wears short shorts and long white boots. Is Patsy me name? Even in the grave, my feet keep dance hall. Me's a dance hall rebel woman. Is a rebel dance me a dance. For if you look the moves good, you see it's Africa them come from. But the people don't know that. And me never know it neither. Is Mother Nanny tell me. It's them kind of thing we need to tell the people. We don't need no more preaching Torah. Back to Africa. The people need Africa. Garvey takes off his hat and holds it against his belly. Sister, you are right. This time we need a ship of a different kind. The people must return to Africa on fleets of the mind. This is where Zion is. Yes, I. Yes, I. We need a plan, Nanny says. Something great, same as we imagine we nation, yet simple as a goat's milk. That's how the Maroons defeated the enemy. Who would believe that we could defeat the British with a few roots and river stones and so-so weeds? A woman dressed in white beats a drum between her knees, 3 times 3. Tears run down her face, her lips tremble, 3 times 3. Her hands call sound uprising and skin deliverance. But how shall we start? The drums stop. The woman falls to the ground, her body shaking. Someone sprinkles her with white rum. She lets out a sigh, and everybody is quiet. With the children, Bob says. He steps forward into the circle, still wet from the storm. My name is Robert Nesta Marley. I man used to play music, But before that was a boy, have a pain in my heart. My heart so heavy, it beat with a one drop. Is music and Rastafari save me? But everybody don't so lucky. The youth them, me hear them ball at night outside in the road. And when them eye water dry up, them beat them one another. It's them we must start with. With one mighty force, calls Garvey. The little youth shall lead us. One by one, we must build an army. Selah. Somewhere, a lizard begins to sing. The young girl Hortense rises up, and Bob gives her the drum. Her small hands beat the skin, chanting down Babylon. The spirits sing Nyabingi, and Nanny dances in the circle. She grabs the hem of her skirt as her feet inch the ground, working the perimeter. There is a scent of white rum and a swirl of mango leaf and bird feather. And this is what the drums speak. Zion train coming, Zion train coming. People get ready, Zion train coming. Zion is a place inside, calls Garvey. And this is what the drums speak. Set the children free, set the children free, set the children free. Patsy zips up her boots and dances with Nanny in the circle. Who can't sing, clap? Who can't clap, testify? Who can't testify, dance, she calls. Her knees dip and part. A draught travels her spine and rises to her head. It pushes at the space between her scalp and funeral wig. She closes her eyes and whispers, Ra. For this is what the drums speak. Zion train coming, Zion train coming. Children get ready, Zion train coming. And the woman with the furious plait begins to cry, for she sees her great-grands far, far on the other side. They have her guinea cheekbones and ashy skin. Zion is a place inside, she calls, hoping they will hear. And her bare feet dance the words into the dust of the dirt yard. Zion is, her heels treading faster. Zion is, go the drums, and spirit feet massage the ground. For this is the real reason there are almost 200 little earthquakes on this island per year, and why you should pay attention when the photo on the living room wall shifts sideways, your feet unsteady in the hallway. For this is how the long dead rock our fever babies or shake the youth from don't care.
Kai is going to read from Augusttown.
Yeah, so I'll just read the opening of one of the chapters. So Augusttown takes place both in one day, less than a day, really 4 hours. But it also takes place over about 150 years. I guess one of the things I'm interested in is how a day contains all of history. So this little piece comes from the present day where a little boy has just, where a little boy has just returned home. A teacher has cut off all of his hair, and his grandmother knows that something dreadful is going to happen as a consequence of this. And she's delaying the happening of this terrible thing, what she calls the autoclops, by telling him a story of Alexander Bedward, who is a historical figure in Jamaica. He was a preacher man who, in 1920, said he was going to fly. So that's all the context you need. So this is in the middle of the book. Some days have more roads than others, and some roads more distance, so that when a woman complains how long the day is, maybe she is counting its roads rather than its hours. Ma Taffy is a woman who understands this, the true length of days. And so while Mr. St. Joseph's is in his classroom, rooted to his desk, she is on her veranda walking in a circle. So consistent is this orbital march that it seems to create its own music. Her walking stick tap, tap, tapping, and her slippered feet pressing the same planks of wood, drawing out of them melody and harmony, a symphony of creaks. Ma Taffy does not hear the music. She's lost in her thoughts. The guns have been taken away, but what next? What else can she do? She wishes she was the kind of woman who knew other things, the candles to light, the oil to pour, the tea to brew, that would create a place of peace. But she does not know such things. She only knows that this day is going to be long. Her whole body knows it, and her feet, of their own accord, are trying to find the winding and dangerous road they suspect they will have to walk. As she goes round and round, Ma Taffy is tilting her head at an angle and observing the boy. It is the angle which she dislikes. She's blind. The angle from which she's able to glimpse the very little of things that she still can. The deep dark she is accustomed to has left, and the world has now resolved itself as a silver blue haze full of shadows. Now she can see silhouettes of trees and houses and people. She can see the boy's shorn head. The sight, dim as it is, makes the old woman swallow hard. What she has suspected is indeed true. The boy she once rescued from a toilet bowl has become smaller. And it isn't just his hair. Something else has been cut out from him. Something Ma Taffy suspects will never grow back. Something the little boy doesn't even know how to cry for yet. It occurs to Ma Taffy that whenever Kaya's hair grows back, it will almost certainly grow soft and straight. It will look like white people's hair. For his short life, the boy's dreadlocks have hidden this fact from him. But when Kaya grows his mulatto hair, will he then realize something about himself, something about his father, something that his mother has not bothered to tell him? It is a question which Ma Taffy herself has never voiced, and yet it lingers between herself and Gina on the skin of their relationship like a rash. Ma Taffy forces herself to sit down once more beside the boy, and she picks up the story of the flying preacher man where she left it. In them days, the whole place did smell of shit. What? Kaya is confused. He has forgotten that they are in the middle of a story. August Town, Ma Taffy explains. In those days, when the preacher man did begin to float, the whole place did smell of shit. It's just now I remembering it. The smell. Every jackman and woman from every corner of Jamaica was pouring into August Town. They just kept on coming, people like ants, thousands upon thousands of them. You couldn't imagine such a thing if you wasn't there. Some of them was even coming back from foreign, from Panama and Curacao, all because they hear what was happening and, more importantly, what was going to happen.
Could you both talk about what you consider or understand to be connection to spirit, if you don't mind, please?
Well,
Ask Muta.
yeah, ask Muta.
You know, how are we supposed to talk as rational, critical teachers, scholars, critics, whatever,
right,
about these things that,
right,
you know, it's like
yes,
what you said about your grandmother, bedward to eat at, you know?
Right, right.
But because that's what we're supposed to say about these things. Don't be
Right.
silly. Don't be ridiculous. I was trying to tell my son about, you know, the Bedwood story last night, and he's there. Yeah, please, you know.
Right.
How do we
Yeah.
talk about what exists but
Yeah.
doesn't?
Well, connection to spirit can mean many things, and I understand what you're saying, you know, asking how can we speak about this. I spend a lot of my life in the world of academia, which is not a very soulful world. And And so, you know, sometimes it's hard to just, you know, talk about Duppy and those things. You can do it in fiction, though, right? But really, in my growing up, these sorts of conversations were often and natural. I was raised by working class parents. They were both country people. I was raised in town, but both of my parents are from the country. And they, in many ways, dwelled in the world of spirit. You know, at our dinner table, we didn't talk about poetry and books. We talked about maybe the Duppy that somebody saw, or we talked about the black moth that's on the ceiling, those sorts of things. And even when I call my mother now, those are the conversations we have. You know, we have very serious conversations about how my father touched her on the shoulder, my father who passed away, or how, you know, those sorts of things, right? So I grew up with those stories. I also, another part of it, of the spiritual experience, there's that part, but my father also was a preacher, we attended a very charismatic church, a very spirit-filled church, and I've forged my own path now, but that was, you know, there was also that sort of realm of spirit as well. And all of these things come together in my fiction. And there's also a part of it, too, of me searching for and forging my own path and making sense of all of these spirit experiences. But they're all valid and real to me.
I was about to answer, and then I thought, oh, I probably have just one passage where I tried to answer it. There's a weird moment in the book that reviewers have always been quoting where it seems the book stops itself and is kind of waves this accusatory finger at its reader. And I guess this is me trying to explain, and this is really me just repeating exactly what Gabriel Garcia Marquez has said in the past, and it's something I believe. But anyway, the book stops at some point in the middle, and it is speaking to its reader. Look, this isn't magic realism. This is not another story about superstitious island people and their primitive beliefs. No, you don't get off that easy. This is a story about people as real as you are, and as real as I once was before I became a bodiless thing floating up here in the sky. You may as well stop to consider a more urgent question, not whether you believe in this story or not, but whether this story is about the kinds of people you have never taken the time to believe in. But that is what I believe. That is, I don't know if... My thing is that I must respect the person whose story I'm telling. And probably one way, I'm not sure I do believe it, but when I'm in that character, I trust it. I trust this character's belief. I trust what they've seen. And I just tell it with absolute belief. And I try not to ironize it or to undercut it with, you know, any kind of wink or, they're not cute. They're not, the old woman like Ma Taffy is not somebody who just has wisdom, which we are willing to grant, but she has intellect and theoretical sophistication. There are other things that we can grant to them that we don't usually grant. And I think it's just important that I give that kind of complexity to these characters and how they see the world.
But also, is that sort of spirituality less rational than like Christ rising from the dead or walking on water? I find
Right.
Weird the way you're talking about it as if
Exactly.
it's superstition, but then we have all this myth in Christianity.
Right.
Everyone just seems to accept as being like
Right. Jesus turned the water into wine.
talking about ourselves as superstitious, when people are breaking bread and drinking wine and saying it's someone's body. I mean, why is one more superstitious? That's kind of interesting.
The question was, why is... Obviously, I'm a lousy chair. What can I say? No, it's which is why I mentioned. The question was whether that the kind of irrational, or superstitious, or marvelous marvelously real world that's evoked in these two novels is any different from that evoked in the Bible, for example. And that's exactly what Erna Brodbus says or uses in her novel Mile, where the Reverend finally has to kind of say, well, actually, he realized that he was equally tricking people when he was talking about, you know, bodies rising from the dead. Okay, two last questions before we turn over to the floor. The marvelous equation of the dread asserts, and we all in the Caribbean know this to be true, and I think it is really a Caribbean phenomenon. Madness is rampant on this island. The mad dream dreams and have visions. They stand on street corners and tell it. No one listens. But you both have. It's madness, of course, to think that spirits of the dead can, like Marcia so powerfully evoked, can return and talk to our material reality and engage with it, or is it? What do you make of madness and the mad, or the apparently mad people that figure in your texts?
Well, you know, when just a small story. When I was writing The Last Warner Woman, the novel before this, which is I was trying to think about just that statistic that the largest percentage of people sectioned off in the UK as mentally ill, as schizophrenic, have been Jamaican women. And, you know, why did that happen for about 30 years? And I was trying to think through this, you know, the kind of racism that doesn't allow black women, especially spiritual black women, to be themselves, blah, blah, blah. So I'm doing all of this research and being very angry about the statistics and the unfairness of this. And I go back to Jamaica and I'm talking to people about some returning residents. And I say, you know, yeah, the unfairness that they were always labeled as mad. And everyone said to me, no, Kai, them did mad. No. Kai, I understand what you're trying to say, but them did really mad for true. and so it does become a kind of difficult thing. You know, there is a kind of zealous spirituality in the Caribbean that does that does hide, that does, you know, mask certain kinds of excesses. So to put it in the best way, so, you know, there is on one hand, I do think there's a big conversation, honestly, that we have to have about mental illnesses and how we deal with them in the Caribbean and how they manifest themselves and how we create a community that is supportive and that gives support. And we can't always brush it over with the kind of excuses of fiction that always glorifies it. I think there is something to do in that, but there is something else that really has to happen about how we treat the mentally ill. And I'm a little shy about fiction always mounting them on pedestals, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Marcia?
Yeah, I would agree. Also, in Jamaica, the so-called mad, often they're not mad. Maybe they're just homeless people on the street. And I feel that these categories of people, sometimes they come to be conflated. So we have to be careful about that as well. But you know, in Jamaica, you are surrounded in many ways by, you know, this figure of the mad person. And so it's hard for it not to creep into your fiction in some sort of way. It's part of your everyday reality, I would say. It's just one of the archetypes out there, is what I would say, in terms of Jamaican narrative space. So you can't avoid it.
Opened up a whole number of issues, but it's time to give the floor, who has already started, time to ask these wonderful writers questions about their books and the fascinating ideas that have come out of this short conversation. So, questions? Brendan?
To both of you, the English writer Will Self talks about psychogeography, and when he goes to visit places, he walks them. So when he came to Toronto, he walked from the airport down to Toronto through tunnels and so on. And I wondered how much of the landscapes that you have been describing did you walk back through and try and sort of reabsorb? Kai mentioned a little bit of this, but be interested, trying to relate to the place, how much did you physically reinvestigate?
Well, the hub of my novel is Halfway Tree, and I feel that I, in a sense, came of age in Halfway Tree. I went to a high school in that area, and that, in terms of geography, I would say that that geography represents something of me in a certain way. Halfway Tree is often thought of as the intersection between uptown and downtown. And I think that there's something of that which informs the way I live and move in Jamaica. And also, there's I don't know if some of you have not been to Halfway Tree. There is a clock tower there. And there have been long periods of time during which that clock has been stuck, not saying the right time. Right? And so all of those things, those images have been part of the geography of me as a Jamaican, and they informed the book as well. So in writing the book, I did return to Halfway Tree and also walked its perimeters and spoke to people as well. And spoke to people because this book covers Halfway Tree over time. And so I spoke to people, various vendors in the area to see if they remember Halfway Tree 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And some of them would say, oh, go talk to such and such. And then I would talk to that person to see what they remembered. And I tried to piece bits of its history together in that way. Also based on what I remember of Halfway Tree over time as well. And also projecting it into the future of what might happen.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, in very practical ways, the novel takes place in Augustown, but the novel is interested in how class operates in Jamaica. So there's Augustown, then there's Mona, and these things literally rise up in gradients. I mean, the landscape is a perfect metaphor of what happens. So Augustown in the valley, then Mona, then Beverly Hills, and I kept on doing that drive because that drive from Beverly Hills through Mona to Augustown is pretty important to the whole novel, and so I did that several times just to feel, because that's when the climax is going to happen. But in a whole other way, so in very practical ways, yes, I did travel and that's where I'm from. I mean, even though in the book it's Beverly Hills, my own house growing up in Jamaica was in Hope Passes, which literally did look down on Augustown, which again is something I'm interested in. What becomes a physical act of looking, but it becomes layered in all other kinds of ways. But in a more profound sense, I've always been interested in place, but not that place is, but how is place contested, how our place is created. Meaning, so Augustown begins with a kind of geographic coordinates, which is what space is. That's not place. So everywhere in the world has a position on a map, and that is just space. When does space become place? When do humans impose names, history, meanings? When do different people come into the same space and impose different meanings? And so is Augustown different things to different people, and how does the idea of these different places collide and create something in the midst of that? That is essentially what all my work is interested in. Yeah.
And to add to that too, I would say that I'm also interested in charting a spiritual geography as well. At Halfway Tree, before there was the clock tower, there was a silk cotton tree, and the silk cotton tree is very much associated with the spirit world. So there's a spiritual geography which inhabits that area as well, and you can trace that too.
And
I'm just interested that neither of you has read the other's work on this. But I mean, you said, I don't know if you guys know each other, but you've read each other's previous work. But just given that it's such similar topics, I just wonder, is that deliberate? I can understand while you're writing your book, you don't want to be influenced, but I would have thought you'd be immensely curious once you'd finished to see what the other person had written.
Well, remember, they were both shortlisted for this prize, so presumably they didn't want to know.
Well, I don't know. I'm asking. I wouldn't have been able to resist. I would have been like, oh my God, I want to see what the composition sounds like. No?
Sorry. I got Marcia's book when I heard the title, which I think is probably the single best title I have heard in a long, long time. So it's been on my shelf. But inevitably, I do this thing of, what? A new Caribbean writer has a book? And so there are just kind of boxes that you need to get to. That's just inevitably the case of all people who love books. You always have more books then.
Yeah. The questions back.
Okay.
Just
yes, it's very hard because the light is right in my face. Go ahead.
It's here. It's me.
Yeah. Oh,
Here.
sorry, Nancy. Yes, and then the two at the back.
Just a question, because you started saying that this is not, which I think is amazing. This is not magic realism. Okay, and we laughed. Okay, I did myself. But what is your perception of the kingdom of this world that she quoted, published by Alejo Carpentier, the Cuban writer, in 1949? And there is a great debate between this tradition that he calls Le Royal Merveilleux, which means reality but not magic realism, which is completely different. So what is your perception? You and her, of course.
Right. Well, I think the term magical realism, sometimes it can be useful for readers. It all depends on your connection to the material. I don't use the term magical realism to describe my work myself, but I also understand that maybe for some readers it might be a useful term. I would put it that way. So I wouldn't really dismiss the term, but I feel that many writers of magical realism, particularly those writers from the Caribbean, that they don't necessarily use that term to describe their work. So I think that it's something that is useful for maybe literary critics in a certain context, is what I would say.
Yeah, I'd love just to talk to you more about just that, the other Spanish word that means reality and is not... Okay. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because that term, realism, magic realism, it started much years before in Guatemala by a very important Guatemalan writer, Miguel Ángel Asturias.
Sí.
So that's very important, and it deals with the culture of corn. So in the Caribbean, it's much more the Royal Merveilleux from the Haitians. And that's why I see the connection between the kingdom of this world from 1949 and yourselves.
Yeah, I would, yes, I warm to that kind of idea, absolutely. And I guess my hesitation with magic realism as it is mobilized sometimes is that it's, but this for everyone, it feels to me that it's often how, this is the more facetious way of saying it, it's how white people understand Caribbean reality when they can't. When I can't make sense of it, it's a way to contain us. So, and you know, when often you hear people saying, yes, you know, I was in this place and coming at the Kumamit. That's not magic. Or you know, when a woman says, you know, that she wakes up in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning and something in her heart tells her that her son just died. That is reality. I'm not making that up, and I'm just kind of hesitant about those ways of dismissing realities just because it comes outside of your experience. But on another sense, I do understand the genre of magic realism, and I have no problem with that and writing within that genre. But I think there's something else that comes close to when you are writing the reality of the Caribbean, that you have to be careful that do not dismiss this story as that.
Sorry, but we are running out of time. The boss is here, and I am under heavy manners, as I told you. But we'll take one last question from the back. That gentleman had his hand up for a while. And then we really have to wrap up.
Yeah. Marcia, much of the novel seems structured like poetry. And I wondered why you called it a novel. You and I have had a discussion about this, but I would like to invite you to talk about that a bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think of this as a hybrid novel, and I'm really interested in pushing the boundaries of what a novel can become, and challenging what it means to write a novel. And, that requires a certain amount of creative risk. But I'm interested in that sort of risk when it comes to interrogating what we mean by novel. And writing out of Jamaican creative space, I'm thinking of reggae music, which was born out of a merging of African drumming, R&B, gospel music, all of these things became reggae. I'm thinking of Jamaican language, which is informed by English, African syntax, Spanish, and we created this new thing. And so then I asked, well, what can the novel become in my hands? And so this is why I have this impulse to create something hybrid, is what I would say. And the other thing I would say too, I'm thinking, I used to go to my grandmother's house in the country, and she was one of those old-time Jamaican women who would flower paste her wall with, newspaper clippings, pictures, calendars, all these things. And to me, this is the height of creativity, and it's something of, I would say, a model for the type of novel that I'm interested in writing. Something which is collage, hybrid, pitchy-patchy in an interesting way. I like pitchy-patchy. So.
Just when you think that we're at a peak in terms of Caribbean literature, people like these two come along and you see we're going up again. Please, flying. Thank you, Carolyn. Please join me in thanking our wonderful writers. And they're ready to sign all the books you want. Rush over and buy them. They're ready to sign the books outside. And I have to announce the next session, which is starting here in about 4 minutes. And we have poet Eddie Baugh talking to poet Aishan Hutchinson about how seductive or demanding or insistent is the calling of poetry. So please join us at that.